Thank you, Mike, and good morning. We'll shift gears here to talk about weather, and I think I'll summarize here at the beginning. Try to be got quite a bit of material to get through, but hopefully quickly. But the bottom line is, weather-wise, the pattern that we have been in here in Michigan and the Great Lakes region for the last couple of weeks will continue, at least in the short term. But there are hints of a change coming up, and I'll talk more about those in just a moment. For the past week here, though, our mean temperatures on the left-hand side here for the week range from a degree or two below normal in eastern portions of the state to a degree or two above or warmer. So we were pretty close to the long term, or what the climatology says for us at this time of the year. No real departures one way or the other. On the right-hand side, our weekly precipitation. It depended on where you were, but for much of certainly the central and southern part of the state, it was another relatively wet week. Widespread 1/2 to 1 inch or greater totals. You can see here on the image, with some embedded totals up near 2 or even more than 2 inches. One big exception to this was the far northern part of lower Michigan and northwestern lower Michigan, and that is right now the driest area relative to the rest of the state. Of course, we've had a huge change from in much of the state, from abnormally dry to wet in just a few weeks. But that northwestern part of the state is really where the concentrated, the most dry landscape still remains in the state. And we'll see. There will be further changes with that here probably before the week is out. Looking at the forecast moving ahead, where are we going? Well, this morning we've got a cold front. You can see that on the map here, really right through the middle of lower Michigan. And a couple things about that: normally that would be a focusing mechanism for precipitation at this time of the year, but because of jet stream flow across North America, and because of a very active southern branch here across the southern U.S. and into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys, most of the moisture that's accessible or would be accessible to us normally is cut off. And so this cold front is making it through the state here as we speak, relatively dry with almost no precip. Now, on the lower left, this is a recent radar shot. There are a few isolated showers here or there in the eastern portion of upper Michigan and the far northeastern lower. We will see, as this front sinks southward, it's going to go down to the Ohio and Indiana border here and then stall out. But there will be the chance for, and I think the word probably is mostly isolated, showers that may redevelop here during the day today, this afternoon and evening. The most likely, if that does happen, most likely it would be across the eastern lower. I think most of western lower Michigan and certainly upper Michigan probably will remain dry for the rest of the day. A little breezy, with winds shifting around and back of that front to the northwest, and a degree or two cooler than it was yesterday. But for most areas of the state, we'll be looking at highs from the mid and upper 70s north to maybe 80, 81 in the far south, with mostly fair conditions across most of the state. Again, greater chances, though, for clouds and for precip in the eastern part of the state. By tomorrow morning, you can see that frontal boundary is down near the southern border of the state. And then our next major weather system here just off to our west, that's an area of low pressure across the northern plains. And that's going to make its way through the state overnight Friday and into Saturday. This one right now, all of the guidance is strongly suggestive of a widespread rain event. We really have, if we look at the next week, we've got two big events. This is the first one of them, and we will see showers and thunderstorms develop from west, or we'll call it northwest, to east across the state by tomorrow afternoon, and then especially tomorrow evening into early Saturday before everything comes to an end during the day. On Saturday, there will be another frontal boundary and wind shift behind this, but precipitation with this particular event will likely be widespread, with 1/2 to 1 inch total. So pretty good rain, and locally heavier. it is possible, especially across the southern half of lower Michigan. We could see some 1 inch plus totals here as well. So we are thinking fairly widespread and relatively heavy precipitation with the system. Now, I mentioned on Saturday, or here's Friday evening, actually showing you when the bulk of that precipitation is expected to fall. That'll be the highest threat again, PM into the early morning hours, and then by Saturday morning, you can see things beginning to clear from west to east across the state. Most of the state and most of the day, it will be dry and a little bit cooler. Sunday looks like a beautiful day, cooler, highs down into the 70s, lows generally we're talking about in the 50s, but dry. Now, I mentioned the second system. Well, that's expected to arrive late Sunday and into Monday. And this is a weather forecast map here for Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And another really significant area of low pressure for the time of the year is forecast to move across the state. So just like we saw Friday night, into early Saturday, we'll see a repeat performance late Sunday and into Monday with more. And we'll call it again at this point, it's looking like it could be widespread once again, and at least 1/2 inch or greater totals. So when we put everything together in the gauge here over the next week, now beyond Monday, there will be a couple of dry days, but another chance for rainfall by the middle or latter part, maybe Thursday. So this active weather pattern that we've been in, again, is going to continue, at least for the short term, with frequent chances for rain, and in this case, actually relatively heavy rain. And on the map here, this has been the most aggressive precip forecast we've seen in a little while, but certainly 1.5 to 2 inch totals over much of Michigan. So it again, at least the potential is there for a very, very wet upcoming week. Our reference potential evapotranspiration rates for the upcoming week, temperatures really for the next 7 days, probably looking to be close to or maybe a degree or two below the normals, but generally we're talking here for PET rates about 0.16 to 0.18 of an inch per day on average. So not very far away from what we typically see for the middle of August. Our medium range forecast guidance, jumping ahead, I mentioned some changes, and I have both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 because day timeframes here, because there are changes indicated. But the pattern that we've been stuck in here on the lower left-hand side for the 6 to 10 day, that is expected to continue at least for the next week. That's largely what you see here. However, note that there is a moderation in temperatures expected here, especially as we get towards the latter part of next week. Still looking for wetter than normal conditions with above normal precipitation totals. And then in the 8 to 14 day time frame, note that there have been some changes in the jet stream. Notably, it shifted further north, the main core of the jet stream, and that should result in a continued warming or moderation of temperatures to above normal levels. You can still see normal to above normal precipitation totals. So really thinking there might be a change. Right now, collectively, the guidance is suggesting there will be a jet stream change here coming up later in the month, probably to warmer, maybe ultimately to a little bit drier than we've been as well, but certainly towards warmer temperatures. So that's what the medium range forecast guidance is suggesting. Finally, we've had a number of requests at the climate office for information, given that some of our crops, because of the earlier drought and dryness, are behind where they typically are. What about the first freeze dates of the fall? And I just wanted to say something really quickly about that. It's a tough thing to do. The bottom line is we have very, very little accuracy in forecasting this less than a few days ahead of the event. So the best way to do it is to look at the statistics, and that's what you see right here. For, well, the last 60 years across the state of Michigan, when does this is the first 32 degrees or lower average date of the fall. Now, I've used that as a generic threshold. Note that if we want to look at what knocks out corn, our first killing freeze, we would be doing 28. It would be a little bit later than the dates you see here. But in general, these first fall freeze dates here, you can see some areas selected here. It depends on where you are, relative both to the north and south and also to the lakes. but you can see it's as early as mid-September in the middle of the Upper Peninsula to late September in the middle of the northern lower. And then once we get down to the southwest and southeast corner of the state, that's where this is latest. We typically are into the middle of October. That's what the long-term normals say climate-wise, and that's what you should probably plan for, at least to think about. However, there's one more factor here that sort of muddies the water a little bit, and that's over time, the dates that these dates have tended to occur each year are tending to occur later because we're seeing a shift in the seasons, and in general across Michigan, the date of that first 32 degrees or lower in the fall has been getting about 1 to 3 days later per decade. So looking at this collectively again, back to those numbers I had, we're looking at what would you plan for in a year like this, not knowing anything else other than the climatology. Well, you'd say probably about the third week, given that trend. In the middle or the interior portion of Upper Michigan to the beginning of October in northern Lower Michigan to the third or even the fourth week in October in the far south. That's sort of a general guide as to what we would expect. Of course, it changes from year to year, but based on the statistics, that's what we would expect to see. Now, and one other thing, if you're looking at the killing freeze, add a few more days on to that as well for the first 28, because that typically does occur several days later than the first 32 of the season. I'll stop there and summarize again active weather for the short term, followed by possibly a transition here as we approach the later part of the month. And with that, I will move on here. I think I'm going to turn it over or introduce our speaker. And our speaker next week is, and this isn't the first time we've done this, but we've got a hot topics question and answer session. So you get a bonus here with a number of different specialists, and here are some of those who will be with us here. So bring your questions, bring your issues. If you've thought about asking, this is the opportunity to do that. That's next Thursday at Virtual Breakfast. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Phil to talk about RUP credits. Thanks.